Today, I'm bringing you a French suspense film, Complex Investigation. The protagonist, Richard, is a local police officer. His wife is an anesthesiologist. Due to their busy work schedules, they often neglect their daughter. It's the weekend. The father and daughter, who finally have some free time, plan to go to the park to ride bicycles. But at this moment, Richard receives a call from a colleague. They have caught a drug dealer. However, the suspect insists that he is a current colleague of Richard's, hoping he will come to the police station to understand the situation. Hearing that her father has to go to work, the daughter is instantly furious, because this means the good outing plan is ruined again. However, Richard promises he will be back within an hour. After the father leaves, the daughter starts complaining to her friends via chat software. The friend invites her to meet up, since her father will be gone for a while. The girl doesn't think twice. She rides her bicycle to the appointment. On the other hand, Richard successfully bails out the informant. However, when he gets home, he finds that his daughter is missing. He thought his daughter had gone out to play with her friends, so he didn't pay much attention. Not long after, a colleague from the criminal investigation department calls. They found a body by the lake. Richard immediately rushes to the scene. He discovers that the victim is his own daughter. He can't believe it. An hour ago, his daughter was fine. Now she has become a cold corpse. After investigation, the police found lubricant on the girl's body. No DNA was left at the scene. The murderer should be a very cautious person. According to the friend who invited her out, the two did meet, but after an argument, the girl left. He has no idea how the girl was killed. The police attach great importance to this case. They almost deployed all police forces to search for the murderer throughout the process. Several days later, they actually caught someone, a suspect named Daniel. Initially, Daniel did not confess, but under the strict interrogation of the police, he still confessed to some details that only the murderer would know. It was thought that this case could be concluded. Unexpectedly, a year later, Daniel's defense lawyer actually filed an appeal to the court. He stated that the confession made to the police was all obtained through torture, and up to now, the police have not produced any evidence to prove Daniel's guilt. The entire investigation process was very hasty. Most importantly, the investigators were all colleagues of the victim's father. There was inevitably a suspicion of collusion. The lawyer made so many defenses, all in order to gain the trust of the jury. After all, the jury's opinion is the key to the verdict. But this case was too heinous, and Daniel was the only suspect. In the end, the jury found Daniel guilty, because France does not have the death penalty. So Daniel was only sentenced to 30 years in prison. After being imprisoned, Daniel began to write letters. He put the first letter he wrote into a clothesline pole. Then he wrote another letter to Richard. The tone in the letter was very calm. He could understand Richard's pain of losing a child, but also hoped that he could slightly suppress his anger, because he was not the murderer of his daughter. He was not afraid of being wronged, just could not bear the real murder walking free. Seeing this, Richard broke down again. He could not accept losing his daughter. Even more, could not accept the murder of his daughter. Still arguing with him. Before you know it, another year has passed. Richard, while on a mission, accidentally heard a broadcast. The Bordeaux police caught a serial killer. He started targeting young children when he was 20. This news was very important to Richard. Could the murderer of his daughter really be someone else? The scene shifts to the prison. A prison guard brings Daniel a love letter. Although he is still serving his sentence, his admirers are numerous. Some are even willing to wait for him to be released. The prison guard can't help but sneer at Daniel. As long as one is handsome, even a scoundrel will have admirers. Meanwhile, Richard starts applying to his superiors to investigate the serial killer. Knowing they can't control him, they agree to his application. However, this case is not within their jurisdiction. Before making any decisions, he must seek his own permission. That afternoon, Richard approaches the bald police officer from Bordeaux police station. The two are good friends. Upon learning Richard's intentions, he helps him access the case files. The serial killer's name is Eckmann. Due to a memory defect, he often confuses past crimes. Richard takes this clue to his superior. Not long ago, the police found a victim's body in the wilderness. When Eckmann confessed to this case, he mentioned bicycles and lakes, but the victim was found in a barren wilderness, and the victim had walked there. Most importantly, Eckmann has a cousin. The place where Richard's daughter was murdered is near his cousin's home, and his daughter left on a bicycle that day. The death site was also endless. So Richard speculates that Eckmann is likely the murderer of his daughter. To get more clues, Richard approaches Eckmann's cousin. He wants to know if Eckmann was here when his daughter was murdered. The cousin takes out some payment slips from the cabinet. Every time her brother came for treatment, she made the doctor's appointment for him. The dates on the payment slips should be the times he was here. He finds that the time of his daughter's murder was the day before the payment slip date. Richard immediately called his bald colleague. He asked him to assign a prosecutor to talk to Eckmann. He had a gut feeling Eckmann was definitely involved in this case. On the other hand, Daniel still insisted on writing to Richard. His letters were filled with sincerity. Although he was wrongfully accused, he never complained. He even prayed for the dead girl. Recently, Eckmann's suspicion grew larger. Richard's attitude towards Daniel also began to change. He didn't throw the letter away. Instead, he hid it in the drawer without his wife's knowledge. The next day, the prosecutor questioned Eckmann under the supervision of a lawyer. In June 2003, Eckmann worked as a road repair worker at a nearby construction site. According to the work records at that time, around 11 a.m. on the 21st, Eckmann drove to the local landfill to burn materials. The road to the landfill passed through the woods. The prosecutor showed Richard's daughter's photo. Her time of death was around the same time Eckmann went into the woods. The prosecutor wanted him to confirm whether this girl was killed by him. Eckmann threw the photo on the table. He had never seen this girl before. Although he had killed many people, they couldn't pin all the charges on him. On the other hand, Richard drove to the woods where his daughter was murdered. On one hand, he came to remember his daughter. On the other hand, he wanted to find some clues related to the case. At this moment, a sudden noise appeared behind him. Richard immediately got up to check. He found a man sneaking around in the bushes, realizing he had been discovered. The man ran away without looking back. Richard wouldn't give him a chance to escape. He rushed up and knocked him to the ground. What was he doing sneaking around in the woods? What was his intention? The man was frightened by Richard's behavior. He said that couples often come here to date. He was just here to spy. Richard asked how long he had been spying. Did he come here 2 years ago? The man quickly replied that he had only moved here half a year ago. His daughter was killed 2 years ago. He had only moved here half a year ago. Clearly, he was not the murderer. After returning home, Richard replied to Daniel with a letter. He could now basically determine that Eckmann was the murderer. Because there was no physical evidence in this case, they could only rely on eyewitnesses. If Daniel was really innocent, then find a way to prove it to him. Daniel breathed a sigh of relief upon receiving the letter. He took out all the love letters he had received over the past 2 years. The one that left the deepest impression on him was a woman named Carly. Her love for Daniel had reached an obsessive level. Daniel put on the cross that she had sent him, imagining the day they could be reunited. The scene changed. Daniel called his lawyer. He wrote a letter to Carly. Prison guards would read every letter he sent out. Usually it was fine, but this time he had a special request for Carly. He didn't want to be laughed at by the prison guards. That's why he wanted to ask the lawyer for help. The lawyer thought he was going to propose to Carly, so he agreed to his request. The scene shifted to the police station. Richard was reporting to his superior his investigation results. Eckmann's 4 murder cases all occurred along the railway. This indicated that Eckmann was moving along the railway while committing the crimes. The location where his daughter was killed was also along the railway. If he was not mistaken, his daughter should have been the second victim. The next day, Richard went to visit a doctor. He was Eckmann's attending physician. Richard wanted to understand why Eckmann had a tendency to kill. The doctor had a very deep impression of this person. Eckmann was often abused by his father when he was a child. Only his mother was left to rely on. After his mother's death, Eckmann's personality underwent a significant transformation. He started killing people from the age of 20. This should also be related to his childhood experiences. Richard continued to inquire. From a doctor's perspective, could Eckmann be the murderer of his own daughter? The doctor did not give a clear answer. He just told him one thing. The scene shifts to the TV station. Richard wanted to commission a friend to release a news story. He could confirm that the serial killer Eckmann was the murderer of his daughter. Now he wanted to use the TV station to call on witnesses to come forward. If the matter was confirmed, then Daniel's case would most likely be retried. His wife was furious after seeing the news. Such an important matter. She had to hear about it from TV. Did her husband not trust her at all? The next day, Richard's boss angrily found him, bringing a convicted criminal back for retrial. Doesn't the police station want face? Just as the two were in a dispute, the receptionist called. A woman claimed she could provide information about Eckmann's crime. The woman's name was Carrie. She saw on TV the news of the police collecting witnesses. On the day of the incident, she saw with her own eyes Eckmann heading to the place where the girl was murdered. To increase Zheng Yan's credibility, Carrie also mentioned the exact time of the case and the information of the informant. The boss asked him why such important information was revealed only now. Carrie said, because the murder was caught shortly after the incident. He had no reason to associate Eckmann with this case until he saw in the news the police's accusation against Eckmann. Did he realize that the case back then was indeed done by Eckmann? The sudden appearance of Carrie inevitably made people suspicious. So, Richard and his superior investigated his background. Khalil was an ordinary accountant. No criminal record, no fine records. A typical good citizen. He had no reason to lie. In addition to the evidence Richard had, they now had the conditions for a retrial. After returning home, Richard wrote a letter to Daniel. He would use all means to appeal for Daniel. His purpose was clear: to find the truth. Let his daughter rest in peace. The next day, Richard's wife had a bill to pay, but she ran out of checks, so she had to come to her husband's room to look for one. Inadvertently, she saw Daniel's letter in the drawer. This made his wife extremely angry. Her husband had been secretly corresponding with the murderer of their daughter. Now he even wanted to save him. His wife could not tolerate Richard's behavior, so she packed her bags and went back to her parents' house. Before long, the trial date arrived. Khalil was the first to testify. He stated he had personally seen Eckmann go to the crime scene and swore in court that everything he said was true. Next, the court called Eckmann to the stand, although he denied killing Richard's daughter. In the face of numerous evidences, his defense seemed so weak. In the end, only 7 jurors believed Daniel was guilty. According to local laws, at least 8 votes are needed for a suspect to be convicted, so the presiding judge declared Daniel's acquittal. At this point, the film's twist officially began. While packing up in a prison cell, Daniel took out the first letter he wrote. It turned out that Daniel was indeed the murderer of the girl. He had been committing crimes since he was 20. Richard's daughter was already the 3rd person he had killed. Before the prison guards arrived, Daniel swallowed the letter. After being released from prison, Daniel instantly became the focus of attention. He even appeared on an interview show. When asked how he endured the wrongful conviction, Daniel shamelessly claimed it was due to his faith. One afternoon, Daniel invited Khalid out. It turned out Khalid was not a witness, but rather, Daniel had deliberately made him say so. The police couldn't investigate because the letter was handed over by a lawyer, and during the correspondence, Khalid didn't use her current name. Daniel invited her out to destroy those letters. Although Khalid believed it was the sincerity of their love, in Daniel's view, these letters were evidence of their collusion. After seeing Khalid off, Daniel received a call from his lawyer. She had previously asked the lawyer for Richard's address. On the surface, She wanted to express her gratitude to Richard. In reality, she wanted to show off her victory. That night, Daniel paid a visit. In a few days, he would be leaving the city. Before leaving, he wanted to pay his respects to Richard's daughter. Richard poured him a glass of wine, and then took him to his daughter's room. However, as soon as Daniel entered, he fainted and fell to the ground. It turned out, Richard had secretly added a sedative to his wine. The scene changed. Daniel was bound and gagged, and taken to the woods where he had committed the crime. It turned out Richard had always known Daniel was the real murderer. When he visited the attending physician that day, the doctor told him a very important clue. Eckmann suffered from sexual dysfunction. He couldn't possibly be the murderer of Richard's daughter. It was from that moment Richard realized Daniel had been deceiving him all along. So he decided to turn the tables, and after releasing Daniel, he avenged his daughter himself. After saying that, Richard pushed him into the pre-dug deep pit. The next day, the news reported Daniel's disappearance. However, people didn't think much of it. They just thought he wanted to stay away from the media, to live a quiet life. His wife and boss instantly realized the truth after seeing the news. No wonder Richard insisted on appealing. No wonder he didn't let his wife get involved in everything. It was to take all the blame himself. In the end, his wife reconciled with Richard. His boss was also willing to cover up his crime. Between justice and law, everyone chose the former. The story ends here.
复刻调查根据劳伦斯
Adapted from Lawrence Block's novel, Killing Floor. The first hour of the film is no different from ordinary crime films. Until the last 20 minutes, the continuous twists kept the audience on the edge of their seats. Many people say there are too many bugs in the film, but I think it's a gamble on the protagonist's fate. First, there's the scene where Daniel entrusts the lawyer to deliver. If the lawyer reads this letter, then Daniel's plan to incite Carrier to give false testimony would fail. In fact, Daniel wasn't sure whether the lawyer would read this letter. So when he handed over the letter, he made many detailed arrangements. For example, the envelope was not sealed. This gives the impression that there is no secret in the letter. For example, after the lawyer took the envelope, he really wanted to see the contents. And Daniel said, "If you want to see, please." This kind of catch and release made the lawyer a little embarrassed, so he finally didn't read the letter. The second gamble comes from Richard. Armin suffers from sexual dysfunction. If he reveals his condition in court, then the charges against him are invalid. Richard was nervous throughout the trial. It's just that he was afraid of this scene happening. But in the end, he won the bet. Eckmann was too ashamed to disclose his illness in public. That's why Richard's plan succeeded. The third bet. If Daniel left the city directly after being released from prison, then all the efforts Richard had made would have been in vain. This seemed like a big gamble, but in Richard's mind, it was a sure bet. He was a police officer. He knew too well the psychological activities of these murderers. Most killers would return to the scene of the crime after committing the murder, to enjoy the thrill of victory. And Daniel was exactly such a person. The purpose of his visit to Richard was not to say goodbye, but to want to visit the girl's room. His morbid psychology eventually led him to his just deserts. Copycat Investigation is a relatively niche suspense film. The plot is unexpected, yet reasonable. Although it's only 80 minutes long, the social issues it portrays are very thought-provoking. Justice will prevail. This is not just a slogan, but an attitude towards combating crime. When faced with crime, it must be dealt with seriously. Only by being strict and tight can we make those lawbreakers tremble with fear and give up their criminal intentions. Secondly, it's a reflection on parents. This world is always full of various dangers, and children lack awareness of danger. So, parents must cultivate their children's awareness of danger. Never be like the male lead in the film who is tragic, and regret it after the fact.